Let's start with the end of the world, why don't we? Get it over with and move on to more interesting things. First, a personal ending. There is a thing she will think over and over in the days to come as she imagines how her son died and tries to make sense of something so innately senseless. She will cover Uche's broken little body with a blanket, except his face, because he is afraid of the dark, and she will sit beside it numb, and she will pay no attention to the world that is ending outside. The world has already ended within her, and neither ending is for the first time. She's old hat at this by now. What she thinks then and thereafter is, but he was free. And it is her bitter, weary self that answers this almost question every time her bewildered, shocked self manages to produce it. He wasn't, not really, but now he will be. But you need context. Let's try ending again, writ continentally. Here is a land. It is ordinary as lands go. Mountains and plateaus and canyons and river deltas, the usual. Ordinary except for its size and its dynamism. It moves a lot, this land. Like an old man lying restlessly abed, it heaves and sighs, puckers and farts, yawns and swallows. Naturally, this land's people have named it the stillness. It is a land of quiet and bitter irony. The stillness has had other names. It was once several other lands. It's one vast, unbroken continent at present, but at some point in the future, it will be more than one again. Very soon now, actually. Here is the stillness, which is not still even on a good day. Now it ripples, reverberates in cataclysm. Now there was a line, roughly east to west and too straight, almost neat in its manifest unnaturalness, spanning the girth of the land's equator. The line's origin point is the city of Eumenes. The line is deep and raw, a cut to the quick of the planet. Magma wells in its wake, fresh and glowing red. The earth is good at healing itself. This wound will scab over quickly in geologic terms, and then the cleansing ocean will follow its line to bisect the stillness into two lands. Until this happens, however, the wound will fester with not only heat, but gas and gritty dark ash, enough to choke off the sky across most of the stillness face within a few weeks. Plants everywhere will die, and the animals that depend on them will starve, and the animals that eat those will starve. Winter will come early and hard and will last a long, long time. It will end, of course, like every winter does, and then the world will return to its own self. Eventually. Eventually. The people of the stillness live in a perpetual state of disaster preparedness. They've built walls and dug wells and put away food. They can easily last 5, 10, even 25 years in a world without sun. Eventually, meaning in this case, in a few thousand years. Look, the ash clouds are spreading already. Dun dun dun!
Sounds like a real happening place.
The stillness. They're down with the stillness.
More like the thrillness.
I'm telling you, it's the end of the world. This is how the world ends. Not with thunderous applause, as Padme might say, but with a guy summoning a fucking canyon in the middle to bisect a continent on top of a super volcano.
Yeah,
Who'd have thunk it?
breaking the fucking earth in half with his bare hands. Yeah. That's what we're dealing with this week, and how fitting for our scariest episode thus far. I say
Spooky.
I say scariest. Like when Halloween week rolls around, Return of the King's actually going to be our Halloween episode, won't it be?
I don't know. This one's pretty spooky. I'm calling this one 13 Seasons Why.
You're now listening to Socialist Shelf Radio.
Welcome to the Socialist Shelf. Today we are talking about N.K. Jemison's fifth season, and as always, it is I, Jacob, here to do it, here with Lenore.
You mean Slacob and Lenorgan music?
You'd think we were recording this on Halloween. It's the 24th of October.
It's
Or
been Halloween for 24 days. Thank you
I,
very much.
that's a good point. That's a good point.
And it will be for 30 days after.
Mm. And if the war on Christmas is successful, Halloween will begin to occupy December as well.
And
Which
I,
I
for
mean,
one,
Christmas has been illegally occupying November for a long time, so
yeah,
something
we
needs to be
we,
done.
we got to flip that around. Yeah.
Hmm. Well,
Yes, yes.
yeah,
N.K. Jemisin is our author this week, and yeah, I had not, as is becoming a theme on this show, I hadn't read a word she'd written until now. Jacob, you'd had experience with her before, hadn't you?
just the fifth season. This book. I had listened to the audiobook, which was quite good, but I was delivery driving. I feel like I only half absorbed it, really. Like I enjoyed it. It left a very positive impression on me. And I think I remembered no characters' names. Like I remembered Alabaster just because it stood out. But like I was like going into this like, yeah, I know the general beats, but I don't remember character names. I don't remember exactly what the world is. Like I
Some characters have three names.
yeah, exactly. And so I was like had a positive impression. I knew I liked the book. But this is the first time I like sat down, read it myself, and really paid attention to it. And this is a blast. And I think it's worth like noting that this is the first of three books in the series. We're only going to be talking about the fifth season as a book. So, if we say anything wrong here, I've not finished the trilogy. So if we get some lore stuff wrong or whatever, we're speaking within the limited context of the first book. Look, if you didn't want us to just talk about it as a work, you should have published it as a longer work. It's not our fault if we don't know
We
something.
exist in the
No.
context of what we've read
Yes,
and
in
all
the
that came before
context of
us.
the season, of the empire, of our general, we are we're living in the season of the shelf, the shelfinal season, and this is all that we understand. So do not come at me with any wiki shit. I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear any Wikipedia type, Babu Frick, Glup Shido type, lore hand wringing. Um, and yeah, because we're just gonna play fast and loose with what is before us in
I
this
would be I
text.
would be perfectly okay with this like supplanting Star Wars as like the like bloated universe, right? Where
It'd be so funny.
there's like six books about the fucking like the what is it, like the giant weasel thing that gets turned into ice.
Hmm. It's like, yeah, it's like, but this guy doesn't even know about the season of the teeth, huh? That's where the real fans don't read the fifth season. Nobody really gives a shit about the shattering. You got
If
to get into the season of madness.
if Cassandra Clare had written these books, like there would be like three or four books for every fifth season.
Hmm. Bro only, bro only knows about the post-Humanist Empire seasons.
Don't even get me started on the like fucking like Moabite RP communities or whatever.
Hmm. Oh, I'll bet whoever made the fucking obelisks is your favorite dead civ, Normie.
It's like that one joke about like, oh, what kind of leftist are you? I'm a Marxist. What kind of Marxist? Marxist Leninist or Marxist Leninist Maoist? Marxist Leninist Maoist. Marxist Leninist like amethyst obelisk? No, Marxist Leninist garnet obelisk. Die liberal.
And then you shatter the obelisk, killing an entire town in your wake of non-characters.
Hey, they had it coming.
But before
Uh
we do that, let's talk about the woman who crafted this world that is gonna end so very soon, as per that intro we read.
yes. Nora Keita Jemisin, N.K. Jemisin. She's born 9/19/1972 in Iowa City to two master students. And her childhood was split between Mobile, Alabama, and New York City.
Mm.
Two wildly different environments. She went to
Sort of a Eumenis to the countryside type situation, you
You could
might
say
say.
that.
You
You
could
could say
say,
that.
you could
You
say.
menace to what's the original like village called in this?
Just some like podunk thing. I don't remember what it's called. It's not really important.
A lot of the comms don't survive long enough to get names, as we'll see.
Hmm.
Um, so she went to Tulane University for psychology and then to grad school at U Maryland, where she got her education master's. And after this, she moves to Boston, where she lives from the late 90s till about 2007, working as a counseling psychologist and a career counselor. Now, during grad school is when she writes her first novel and she seeks out a publisher. And the publishing house she sends it to holds it in their slush pile for a few years. I wasn't able to find how long exactly before rejecting it.
Mm.
And she writes a second novel, sends it off, same thing. And as she says in an interview for Locus about 2010, it really bums her out at this time because at that time she's relatively new to genre fiction. She's not yet aware that this is normal. The field is just that competitive. Um, but it's in 2002 that she goes to Viable Paradise. And this is a 1 week residential workshop on Martha's Vineyard, sponsored by the Martha's Vineyard Science Fiction Association. Now, instructors there have been people like Scott Lynch, C.L. Polk, Laura J. Mixon, Cory Doctorow, who we were just talking about the other day.
And of course,
Um,
Martha herself.
yes, the lady who owns the vineyard. We can't forget her. Um, it's less about craft than it is about teaching you how to break into professional writing and build your career. And among the advice that she gets there is, look, maybe start by writing short stories, right? And from 2004, beginning with the short story L'Alchimista, that's what she does, right? She says that before then, she hadn't really read short stories other than like Golden Age sci fi stuff that didn't really resonate with her. But she starts reading more modern short stories and writing in that space. She publishes 13 short stories over the rest of the decade. And from there, she's moving, right? So second half of her time in Boston, she joins a writer's circle called the Brawlers, which helps her refine her craft.
Really into Super Smash Brothers. My understanding is she is a Meta Knight main.
Yes, which she's forgiven for that. Like,
No, not by me, but you can, I have no forgiveness for Meta Knight mains in Brawl.
listen, I'm a Dark Samus main. Like, we can agree to disagree. So she moves to NYC in 2007 for good this time, and in 2009, her short story Non-Zero Probabilities is a finalist for Nebula's Best Short Story Award. It'd be a finalist for the Best Short Story Hugo the following year, 2010. And she auditioned to join the critique group Altered Fluid that same year. And if you
Altered Fluid.
Altered Fluid, yeah.
Gross.
And if you, I mean, there's a lot of fluid getting altered. There's a lot of this jumps out of me actually in the course of the novel. We're getting ahead, of course, but there's like fantasy HRT in this. Did you see that? Yeah,
Yes, yes,
yeah.
that's the Altered Fluid.
Yeah, I thought that was pretty interesting. Neither here nor there. By the way, if y'all haven't read Non-Zero Probabilities, have you read Non-Zero Probabilities, Jacob?
Don't think so.
It's very, very quick. I highly recommend you look it up after the record. It's very funny. It's set in New York City, like where the laws of probability have changed so that basically like if it can happen, like even on the off chance it will, like and crossing your fingers will actually like doing superstitious shit like that will affect the probability of like what comes
I
next.
see.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's pretty fun. So 2010 is also when she publishes her first book, The 100,000 Kingdoms. And
That's too many kingdoms.
I would have stopped at like 50,000 personally.
Yeah, that's a decent amount of kingdoms. But
Yeah.
I guess it's a fantasy novel. Guess we'll allow it.
Well, I mean, it's interesting to read about the trajectory of this book because, like, at first she does indeed write it like a standard fantasy epic, right? Multiple like POV characters like Game of Thrones, there's a journey to this important location, like your fucking like Lord of the Rings. And once she rewrites it, she's like, okay, I'm gonna write it the way that I feel like, just a little looser. And that's where she starts really developing her stream of consciousness technique that you can especially see in Essence chapters in this book,
Hmm.
though you can definitely also see seeds of it in Non-Zero, right? And she sends it off to her agent. She's terrified. She thinks that, this is too unconventional. Nobody's going to go for it. And then a week and a half later, her agent is like, yeah, there's like several offers. And it
Hell
goes,
yeah.
yeah. And it goes up for auction. And when it finally is published, it's nominated for a Nebula, for a Hugo, for a World Fantasy Award. It wins a Locus for Best First Novel. So she's off to the races, right? The sequel, The Broken Kingdoms, comes out later that year, and her what's called her Inheritance trilogy finishes the following year with The Kingdom of Gods, right?
Not the funny thing is when I think Inheritance trilogy, I immediately go to Aragon. But they call that the Inheritance cycle, I think, right?
Right. Well, because it was the trilogy initially, and then he's like, okay, Brisinger is not going to be the last book as it
It's
happens.
interesting that this is coming out around the same time, though. There are two major fantasy series called the Inheritance series. It's Neither here nor there, but kind of
I
interesting.
I prefer this one, honestly.
I mean, I haven't read this one, but I guarantee you I will.
Oh, 100%. 100%.
Having, and I speak as someone who read Aragon as a kid and thought it was the shit. I tried to
Yeah.
reread it and I was like, yeah, you can tell this kid has parents had connections in the publishing industry.
I have Murtaugh, right? The spin-off about that character sitting on my shelf because he's like the best
Yeah.
character.
Han
But like
Solo,
he's
you
also
mean?
yeah,
Yeah.
I mean you see why.
Yeah. No doubt.
But
Anyway, just kind of
you see from two books in one year and then the third book the following, like what you see that once she's on a series she's fucking on it, right?
Sure.
Both
She
books in her,
locks in.
yeah, literally, like both books in her Dream Blood duology follow in 2012, and
Hmm.
then in 2015 she drops what we're talking about today, like the fifth season, right? It wins her a Hugo for best novel, making her the first African American writer to win in that category.
W.
Now, the Broken Earth trilogy goes fifth season in 2015, The Obelisk Gate in 2016, and The Stone Sky in 2017. Jemisin is the first and only author to win three consecutive Hugos, and also the first to
Really?
win best novel for all three novels in a trilogy. So,
So she just back to back to back. That's fucking awesome.
yeah, literal hat trick.
What do you know?
And again, from to go from, man, I'm not sure if my stuff's going to get picked up. I don't really know what I'm about here, to this sudden rocketing to this Titanic stature in the scene. Like
Hmm.
it's incredible what you can do. So, and this is a big 3 years for her, because in 2016 she lands a regular sci-fi fantasy column at the New York Times Book Review called
Yeah.
Otherworldly. She'll do this for about 3 years.
Yeah,
Uh,
I've read a little bit of that.
yeah. That same year, she takes to Patreon. She raises enough money to quit her day job and write full time. Not even because she always wanted to quit her day job as a psychological counselor, but because writing was literally just taking up too much of her time at this point.
Well, it was causing problems that when like her technique with children was to like break their hand to teach them they needed to trust her.
Yeah, and that only works like once in every few. Like,
Yeah, then you got to like tap them on the back of the neck, and every time you use the knife on them, you got to do that again. And like every
listen,
now and then,
when it works, right? You get kids that can fucking like stop volcanoes if they want to, but when
it's
it
cool.
doesn't, like, there's a lot of fucking paperwork involved. People get pissy.
She look, most of the kids that go in the chair sleep through the whole thing,
Most of them, yes,
almost all the whole time.
and
Just incomprehensible to anyone who hasn't read the book. My apologies. We'll get there.
And for those who have, oh boy, we apologize even harder.
Fuck. No, I've like in the first few chapters of the sequel, there's a brief Shafa perspective where he said, I would have set that child gently, oh so gently, down in the chair.
Oh,
It's
God.
just, oh,
Get in,
goosebumps.
get in the fucking chair, Shinji. So she picks up a Best Novelette Hugo in 2020 for Emergency Skin, and a Best Graphic Story Hugo for Far Sector in 2022. The City We Became wins a Locus in 2020. She's working currently on a seven-figure film adaptation of fifth season. Like, she's on top of the world
Oh,
right
there's
now.
a fifth season film coming out.
It's happening. Yeah, she's adapting it herself. Yeah,
What do you
and
know?
yeah, and
That's
she
going to be
is.
interesting. I'm interested to see how they do the three perspectives in the film because that's going to be a harder. I mean, not that it's that much of a reveal in the book, but that's going to be like a harder trick to pull off.
It will. Why? And using three different actors, like, you can kind of get to that point. Like, I will say, like, seven-figure like deal. I wonder what the budget's going to be like for this, because like it's gonna have to look fairly fucking impressive.
A lot of rocks moving around. It would be cool if all of the orogeny that's done looks like the earthbending from the live action Avatar: The Last Airbender movie. It's like 30 guys earthbending to move one like tiny pebble. It's like CGI'd to float through the air. I think that would be pretty sick.
That'd be fantastic. Like, if you're an origin, like, you have access to like all the elements essentially, and we'll get into what an origin is here in a minute. Um, just hang on, folks.
Orogene is not my lover,
Just a girl who thinks that you're the one, but the
but
kid is your
it,
son.
yes, but is the lover to several other people, ending poorly.
It does, and that kid that is your son. Well, I mean, there's a few more sons. Uh,
You can always make more.
And she's exactly the sort of person who ought to be on top of the world, I think, because like she's keenly interested in using speculative fiction to explore the crises we're currently living through and the structures that engendered them, right? From a young age, she's very conscious of how white American sci-fi and fantasy is, for example, and the people and the gatekeepers who make it that way, right?
Sure.
Now, her father introduces her to Afrofuturism in her childhood because of this, right? And as she gets older, she starts interrogating these forces. She says in another interview that I read with her, I wasn't any more interested in all black futures than I was in all white futures, right? I just wanted fantasies of exploration and enchantment that didn't slap me in the face with "you don't belong here" messages. I just wanted to be able to relax and dream, right? Stereotypes, tropes that are, decidedly racially charged, that she's seen in white sci-fi fantasy growing up. She wants to cut against that.
She has a short story collection called How Long Till Black Future Month, which I like the name
Yes.
of. Yeah.
Yeah. It's actually there's a
2018, I think.
yes, 2018, and there's a short story in there called Stone Hunger that she wrote in 2014 that she would then go on to expand into the fifth season and the
Yeah.
books after,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Now, in the acknowledgments of fifth season, she mentions that the ideas that would become this book really started around 2009, right? When she attended the Launchpad Writers Workshop. At the time, this was funded by NASA. It was a crash course in astronomy for media influencers like journalists and for sci-fi writers.
NASA put a hand on her shoulder and said, "Have you ever heard of a moon?"
Yeah, literally. Can you imagine like that being like the keynote speech? Like,
Mhm.
there's this thing called the moon.
That would be a really good bit. Yeah.
So, but you start seeing her attention to science, like not for the sake thereof, but just for like verisimilitude, right? She's using it not to like she's not getting super into the weeds of like the rules of how her like magic works and whatnot, how the world works,
Yeah.
but just creating a more convincing backdrop for people to be people against, right?
Hmm.
Now, some really important imagery for fifth season came to her in a dream. This intrigued me, right? She had a vision of a woman coming toward her, like with a mountain coming along behind her, and the woman like was ready to throw that mountain. That was just something that this person could do, right?
Cool.
And this is where you see her knack for blending her curiosity, scientifically speaking, with her keen sense of justice, right? There's an interview in Wired where she talks about spending 3 months in the course of writing this book, learning every thing she can about seismology, visiting volcanoes, interviewing seismologists, right? Now, this is in 2014 that she's doing this. You know what else happens in 2014? Ferguson PD murders Michael Brown, right? So, structural racism, the people on whose labor and enslavement is built an entire civilization, right? That falls into place for her. And now she knows what's making the woman from her dream so angry, right?
Mm.
And yeah, as into the research as she gets, she uses it for background to what really matters, which is her characters, which is their story, right? From that Wired piece, quote, a lot of writers forget that what they're doing is supposed to be art. Your science might be right, but if your characters are like lead and your soft science, your sociology is messed up, you got a terrible book. I'm not going to write this to the satisfaction of an expert seismologist. The goal was to blend science with the art, the creativity, the magic that has enough of a flavor of plausibility about it that people who need a clear explanation for things would have that.
N.K. Jemisin is also telling lore nerds to fuck off, like I did at the top of the episode.
Yes, yeah, exactly. And like you mentioned, How Long Till Black Future Month? She's also got an essay with that same title. There's a draft of it on her website, nkjemisin.com, where she gets into a little bit about what she means by that. And she opens with like a scene counter scene where she's watching the Jetsons, and then she's watching a music video by Janelle Monáe, who's a soul artist who gets a lot into like Afrofuturism and its themes, right? Um, and she's like, yeah, Janelle Monáe is in a dystopian society where like she's a robot and like in love with a human, and so she's like being pursued by authorities and like an outcast based on that, and like it's a hellish existence for this person, but for her, right, it's less horrifying than the Jetsons, because in the Jetsons, black people just don't exist, right?
Right,
It's
right.
it's lily fucking white, and you're like, okay, what happened between now and like the future that the Jetsons depicts, right? Was there a huge like worldwide pogrom, right? Like we don't know. And there's actually a lot of that in this book, right? Is um there's so much of history that's lost to us, and the people and the civilizations, and indeed, the horrific sins and like crimes against humanity that can fall into the cracks of history, right? And how even if people have forgotten them, they reverberate to this day. There is a there's a quote here that she has. I didn't set out to write big, heavy themes. I did not set out to write an allegory for slavery and caste oppression. I set out to write a story about a woman grieving her child. I set out to show what made her extraordinary. I set out to write a world in which people who are powerful, who are valuable, are channeled into systems of self supported and externally imposed oppression, and how you keep people who can throw mountains from throwing mountains and running the world. And this really put me in mind. You said that this was a pretty good one to follow up Tolkien with, and this put me in mind of what he said about like don't read it with like a specific allegory in mind, because yeah, maybe she's not like deliberately evoking like this specific parallel to this specific historical event with what she's writing, but nevertheless.
Sure, if you try and do too many ones to ones here, like the orogenics, they're actually like this race or this class or whatever, then you're going to get into complicated, like weird territory. It's not all one thing. It's
Exactly.
she is taking her experiences in her life and she's creating a new world that is interesting and unique and is not a one-to-one allegory, but yet we can relate to and see ourselves and others we might interact with and through. And that is a better way of experiencing this than trying to be like, well, the Sanzeds are actually, from this part of Northern Africa. And like, no, it's
Mm-hmm.
not like that. And if you try to do that, you're going to drive yourself crazy and turn this into something that it's not.
Exactly. But nevertheless, she has these influences, right? If she, a black woman in this American sci-fi fantasy space, wants to create worlds where she's able to relax and dream, or where you're able to see yourself in a genre that's mostly not you, like it's going to necessarily cut across those anti-racist, anti-colonial,
For sure.
anti-imperialist themes.
And she's got a great article she actually wrote on Tolkien
Mm.
himself. Have you read this?
The
Um,
one, what's it called?
well, she's got a couple actually, but there's one that's just a blog post, and there's another that's an interview where she was interviewed about Tolkien. So I
Oh,
guess
is it the unbearable baggage of working?
no, not that one. That one's good, but that's not the one I'm talking about.
Mm.
Doesn't maybe I'll link it if I remember to. But basically, what she says is she has an issue with sci-fi because you talked about like sci-fi spaces, her being like
Yeah.
sort of an outside force in it, right? Like as a black woman or right, or whatever.
Hmm.
And she talked about how like that's also very difficult to be like, oh, I'm a black sci-fi writer. Like she wants to be a sci-fi writer. And she was like, does that mean that as a black person, I'm not bringing my experiences into this? Of course I am. She says the
Hmm.
actual mistake we're making is not to say, oh, she's is not to like try and level all sci-fi writers. She's like, or fantasy writers. She said, let's look at Tolkien and say he's a white British sci-fi
Hmm.
fantasy author, and here's what he's bringing to the table. Because actually, the story is much more interesting when you don't see Tolkien or Martin or someone like that as a default. Like this is a middle-aged to older white guy from
Exactly.
Europe or the United States, so therefore this is flat default fantasy. And it's like no, actually they're bringing a very interesting and nuanced and their own weird cultural shit into what they're making as well, and we're
Hmm.
all bringing into it. And if we can see, and it basically comes to make the point, and I don't want to like I don't have the quote in front of me, but it goes to basically make the point like by doing this, we're actually like by making her the other rather than everything being its own unique perspective as it actually is, we're cheapening the entire experience on all levels. Um,
Absolutely.
so and I think that's great. And I think it's also though it's also her defeating the idea that like everything she's writing is some kind of act of like, oh, well, this is the black fantasy novel. Like, no, it's her
Hmm.
fantasy novel
Right.
informed by her own experiences that you can see and informed by racial oppression. But also, like, it doesn't exist as an act of protest. It exists
Hmm.
as a, I mean, it is to an extent, but it's also just a good damn novel.
Oh
And,
yeah, no.
and we should
If
like
it's an act of
perceive it as
protest,
such
yeah. If it's an act of protest, it's only rendered as such by any
by the
reactionary force that
systems in
might.
which it was created. Right,
Exactly.
exactly.
Exactly. Yes.
So it is interesting. And I actually do think that her world, and we'll get into it, is
Mm.
more similar to a Tolkien than to a not in the sense of the level of detail, than to something harder like Martin or like who's the one Mormon guy?
Oh,
Um
Brandon Sanderson.
Sanderson, like not that's like gets incredibly super detailed. She has the kind of detail Tolkien has where she like gets very interested in like a specific thing and gets really into it. But like you can kind of wave your hand a little bit about like, well, what are the trade routes? What's the tax system? What's the whatever? Like this world is able to feel more real, I'd say, than Middle Earth does, but less like hard than some of these other fantasy novels. I think it walks actually a very good line of like she
Hmm.
has this realized world, but she's also not going to take a super long time to get into all the weeds. She trusts you to be like, hey, there is this world out there. You're going to see glimpses of it. Fill it in your head. I mean, even when she describes the great city of Sanzat at the beginning, she's like, to be clear, this doesn't really matter. These characters, this politics, it's interesting. Here's the king that's like scared he's going to be replaced because he's just her figurehead. Doesn't matter.
Hmm.
He's fucking dead. That's not what this is about. This is about a woman in a hut somewhere. And I think, yeah,
Yes.
and I think that rules. And it feels very like, I don't know. It feels like something that coming off the Lord of the Rings episode that Tolkien might enjoy, or at the very least, is kind of a spiritual successor to something where it's like, well, actually, this is about the Hobbit, right? This
Hmm.
is about the woman. Not to say that Essun is not a magnitude more powerful than your average Hobbit, because she is incredibly powerful, but the power bent pent up in this character and the just sort of wretched humanness just coexist, as you could probably see from that like opening snatch we read there.
Yeah, see, that's the thing. Like, there was the one ring in fucking Lord of the Rings. Like, but you have people in this setting with 10 rings.
You know,
What do you say to that?
10 rings blinged out. I was trying to think of like try to find some like rap lines about like bling or whatever that like
Mm.
Alabaster could realistically say. Can't imagine that. But he's blinged out, he's flexing his 10 rings, you know. He's got his power for sure.
I do wear 10 rings wherever I go.
10 rings, 10 rings up, 10 rings down. Do we want to
It's
get into what the plot of this book is?
Yeah, I tell you what, like it's really interesting when she does get into like the detail about the environment, right? And I want to read a little bit from how she describes the city of Eumenis
And
early
this is
on.
towards the top, by the way. This city will be
Yes.
wiped out very shortly.
Yes, yes.
So we will spend some time here in the flashbacks.
Eumenis is unique because here alone have human beings dared to build not for safety, not for comfort, not even for beauty, but for bravery. The city's walls are a masterwork of delicate mosaics and embossing detailing its people's long and brutal history. The clumping masses of its buildings are punctuated by great high towers like fingers of stone, hand-wrought lanterns powered by the modern marvel of hydroelectricity, delicately arching bridges woven of glass and audacity, and architectural structures called balconies that are so simple yet so breathtakingly foolish that no one has ever built them before in written history. But much of history is unwritten. Remember this. The streets are paved not with easy to replace cobbles, but with a smooth, unbroken, and miraculous substance the locals have dubbed asphalt. Even the shanties of Eumenis are daring because they're just thin walled shacks that would blow over in a bad windstorm, let alone a shake. Yet they stand as they have stood for generations. A shake, of course, being the terminology in this world for an earthquake, right? And right away, like what'll jump out at you is in Glenn Cook, the writer of the Black Company, does this thing with his locations that I found really interesting. Right, he'll have cities that are just named like words, right? Like or roses, like the Tower at Charm, right? You know, places that have these ordinary words because they haven't been built. They're built like fairly recently, historically speaking, and haven't really had enough time for like language to drift and become like unfamiliar to later generations. It's a very young world. Well, I mean, the world itself isn't young, but civilization is, because it just gets swept away by like war and other forces, right? And you get a sense of that delicacy here, right? Balconies are like a luxury. Asphalt is a luxury, right? What is familiar to us in this world is rendered fantastic and unique in this city because, as we'll get into, it's not a very stable world.
It is a world that, like it said at the beginning, they call it the stillness, ironically. It is a world that is constantly having shakes and quakes, even outside of fifth seasons. It stays very tectonically active. What is a fifth season? Because this is something that really defines their society is every so often, and they're not regular. It could be, a few centuries apart. It could be more than 1,000 years apart, but without fail, a apocalyptic event will happen that is so severe and so dramatic that it nearly destroys society. It blots out the sun, typically some kind of huge volcanic eruption slash earthquake that throws ash into the air, blocks out the sun for several years. And all of society is structured around, obviously responding to these regular earthquakes, but also responding to what they know is coming, which is these seasons. And that's partially done, practically, but that's also partially done as sort of a religious ritual, right? Because most people are not going to live through a season. The season with a capital S, fifth season. Most people are not going to see that. There are times where like 500, 600, 700 years go by without a season, right? Where it's like, if we think about how far back that is, that's like two lifetimes of the United States. Like it's like well out of memory.
Yeah,
But
long enough for seasons themselves to pass into legend.
yes, but they always come. Um, and the preparation of humanity is the only thing that's kept them from being totally wiped out. And you see that like technologically, humanity has been able to advance in fits and starts. Like they have hydropower and like electricity and stuff like that. Like in fact, they have all of that electricity before they've like refigured out cannons. Just like their like fits and starts are very complicated and society has trouble reforming. And in fact, there is an empire that is now united, like a country that is sort of united around the city of Jimenez.
An
And it's the
equatorial affiliation now.
right. And it's really the only nation that has been able to be multi-community for
Mm-hmm.
multiple seasons that they know of in history. And they've managed to do that through like sort of their structure. And then also, as we'll see, through the manipulation of orogenetics, through the manipulation of people who can control the earth itself, which is indeed what our main character is. She is somebody who can control the earth with her mind, control. It's not quite like earth bending. It's basically taking the heat and motion and light
Yeah,
and
like
stuff.
kinetic energy basically from your
Yeah, and shifting
environments.
it around. But there's so much fucking kinetic energy in this world that you have an incredible amount of power, and it like sets it up as these people that have this ability. Um,
There's so much kinetic energy that if I lived there, I might call it Connecticut.
ex God damn it. Here in Connecticut, uh, moving a mountain is easy. Moving a pebble is hard because it's actually grand, feats of power are actually less complicated. So long as they're not, refined. And it just every so often kids are born like this. They don't fully understand it, though they can kind of
Mm-hmm.
breed for it. And society, as a result of these people being so dangerous, has dubbed these people, unfit for life in a lot of places. There's all kinds of rumors about them. Some are false, but it is true that these people can like, control kinetic energy. If they do it the wrong way, the air will have all the heat sucked out of it just by accident of a little kid getting freaked out. So these people are either killed young or taken into this place, the Fulcrum, which is
Mm-hmm.
where basically like a Jedi Order if it was meaner. Not that the Jedi Order is nice, but think about like Revenge of the Sith, Anakin growing up or whatever. But like if the masters were like watching them ready to kill them, actually that kind of is the Jedi. But like it's
Mm-hmm.
it's a really really fucking intense regimented thing to control these people, and society is built on that, and it relies on these people, and it mistreats these people, and they get called ragas, which is like a curse word slash slur. And it's a bad time all around. And I'll say right off the top that this is an example of something that you really can't one to one here because you got to be really careful because online it's like, yeah, and the people with orogeny, they represent racial minorities. And it's like, well, racial minorities, the thing is, racism in real life is actually about some is like a false assumption of lesserness that is not there or difference that is not there.
Mm-hmm.
There is a biological difference in people that can do orogeny. They can actually kill you. So I wouldn't like rush immediately into like this is a one-to-one racial allegory.
Right. You can make
But there is that energy there. Like
yeah,
there is that
you can
like
make
oppression.
comparisons because, part of the fulcrum, right? This Jedi Order for Origins, right? Part of that is guardians, right? People who can like negate orogeny and like turn it back on yourself. So instead of like shifting like tectonic plates, you're just like scrambling your organs and just like dying horribly. Like there's that, there
Hate it.
is bringing up origins within the fulcrum to basically keep the earth stable and basically like co-opt you in that way and to bring you up like, okay, this is like my lot in life. It's a carceral force by another name that is meant to de-radicalize and co-opt these people, yes, but it's fundamentally different from anything that we experience here in our world.
I just wanted to lead off with that because that's like half of the conversation online around this are trying to find like direct connections between like, I don't know, oh, the Rogue Origins are basically the Black Panthers. And it's like, okay, let's not do all that. Like, it's not the
Yeah.
same thing. It's like we said, you can be informed by your experiences of seeing oppression of people who deserve better and have great power, and that great power is shackled and
Mm-hmm.
misused and misattributed and used to for someone else's gain without saying this equals this and this equals this. Allegory brain. It's not, some
Yeah.
things are allegories and this is not. I don't know.
Yeah, it's much more interesting to take these situations as they appear here and see how there's several different ways that origins come together and resist how these things manifest in relation to the structures of oppression that we have, but they're much more interesting in their own context, certainly.
And that's
Uh,
the basic overview. Our this book is split into three narratives that Lenore, how quick did it take you to realize this was all the same woman? Like 5 minutes?
um, I actually, well, about halfway through the book, I was like, okay, well, this has to, the way they're talking about Eumenis and like how it was destroyed at the beginning, and then, Demea goes there, right? There's about halfway through the book, I'm like, okay, this is at different points on a timeline.
Right.
And it wasn't long after that I realized, oh, okay, like Demea is probably gonna grow up and become Cyanide. Yeah, it's not obvious from the jump, but like it still hits you pretty hard once it does come around.
Yeah. I think different people like I figured it out pretty quickly when I first
Mm-hmm.
listened to the book. I was just kind of like, oh, this just seems like this is all probably the same woman. Um, but I think different people like I've even like because I like to go online and see what people's reactions. Some people said it really did take them a lot longer, like even than you did. But yes, this is three different points in a woman's life. Um, and under three different names. Essun is, the character we're presented at the beginning, the 42-year-old woman who,
Mm-hmm.
at the end of the world, has had her son die. And all of the chapters for her are written in second person. You experience this. You are like this.
And this
Uh,
is interesting to me because like the prologue here is not talking to Essen. It's talking to
mm-mm.
you. It's talking to you, the reader, and
Yes.
it introduces Essen. And but from then on, the second person is referring to you as if you are Essen, and that stood
Right.
out to
You
me.
get the introduction to Essun of this woman's name is Essun. She is 42 years old. She's like most women of the mid-lats, tall when she stands, straight back and long-necked, with hips that easily bore two children and breasts that easily fed them, and broad, limber hands. Like you have that, right? But then like later and it gives the quick summary of like this
Mm-hmm.
kid who was murdered by his father because he found out that this kid possessed this power, that this kid was, um, or a genetic, that he had
Mm-hmm.
the ability to had this, and because of the societies, is bigotry the word? Because the kid can actually kill you, right? Like that's the thing that I come back to. It's a complicated problem in this world, and
Yeah,
maybe we can get into it more. But the father has, as soon as he found out his son had this power, he beat his son to death. He's like
it's
child. It's
yeah,
horrible. I'm not defending it, but it is a weird line of like the
there's
kid
there's
can actually
there's the
kill you.
one like X-Men Ultimate comic that I always come back to where the kid like manifests his mutant power just one day when he goes to school, and his mutant power is literally just like radiating this toxic field that melts everybody around him,
Hmm.
and like the X-Men have to send Wolverine to take him out.
Yeah. But regardless of like what they should be doing or should be feeling. The society is not built in any way that takes the humanity of these people into account. In fact, law denies them their humanity, forcing them to hide, forcing them to lead to situations that are violent and horrible. But
Yeah.
that's one scenario we have at the top. And then we have the other scenario of a young girl, which is, gonna be Essun
Yeah,
much
at
longer.
this time early in her life, she's named Demea.
Jamea, yes. And she is going through much like what her son kind of goes through much later on. Her parents find out she has these powers through an unfortunate schoolyard accident, not unlike that X-Men comic.
Hmm.
She is basically, because society still exists at this time, the world has not ended yet. This is, 30 something years ago. They send out a guardian. They send out Obi-Wan Kenobi, Qui-Gon Jinn, if he was like a lot more abusive. Uh, they send out Shafa, who seems so nice and wearing his burgundy cloak, and then he fucking breaks her hand. It's really fucking intense.
Oh God, yeah. I tell you what, it was a little it was mostly the second person that did this for me. It was a little rocky, haha, to start for me, but
Ayo.
once Shafa breaks the kid's hand, like that's where it really took off for me because I'm like, oh, like this is somebody being taught from the beginning that because of what you are, you know, you can expect to be reprimanded with extreme brutal violence, and not even just because of what I mean, not even learning to expect it, but like learning that look, sometimes just arbitrarily people are going to do this to you, and you just have to roll with it.
Right. Shafa is super, and he's this just big, strong guy, and he's got these white eyes. And from the
Mm.
beginning, she's like, he can negate her power. And he's so sweet to her, and he says he loves her. And like, here's the thing, it's worth noting, like Shafa is also this guy who was born and bred into the system, right? We'll find out later on. He has been trained to do this as well. This is systemic. And Shafa is like, I love you. I'm going to take care of you. I'm going to scold your mom because she didn't give you the blanket you deserved. I'm going to make sure you have good food. And now I'm going to tell you a story about how the first guardian killed the first one of your kind,
Hmm.
how your kind has the capacity to be nothing but monsters. And then he's telling her, your kind can't control yourselves. And then she doesn't know what's happening. She's suddenly afraid. And she's like 8 years old. And he says, shh, he says, and adjusts his fingers, aligning them carefully with her own. Then he bears down harder so that the weight of his hand presses on the bones of her palm. He does this deliberately. Shafa! It hurts. He knows it hurts, but he does not stop. No, no, calm down, little one. They're there. When Demaya whimpers and tries to pull away, it hurts the steady grind of his hand, the unyielding cold metal of the pommel, her own bones where they crush her flesh. Shafa sighs and folds his free arm around her waist. Be still and be brave. I'm going to break your hand now.
Ah, I fucking love
What?
that.
Shh, he says. Shafa does something that causes his thighs to tighten with effort and his chest to bump her forward, but she barely notices these things. All her awareness is focused on her hand and his hand in the horrid, wet pop and jostle of things that have never moved before, and the pain of which is sharp and immediate and so powerful that she screams. Um, and he has this moment where he's like, you could kill me, you could do this, you could use your power, and she resists using her power, which is of course a test. And then later he says to her, your hand is broken in at least three places. I would guess if it's splinted, if you take care, it could probably heal with no permanent damage. If I crush it, however, she cannot breathe. The fear has filled her lungs. She lets out the last of the air in her throat and manages to shape it round a word. No. Never say no to me, he says. The words
Mhm.
are hot against her skin. He bent to murmur them in her ear. Orogenies have no right to say no. I am your guardian. I will break every bone in your hand, every bone in your body if I deem it necessary to make the world safe from you. Um, and then she's crying and she's saying, why? And Shafa says, keep stroking her broken hand. I love you, he says. I hate doing this to you. I hate that it's necessary, but please understand, I have to hurt you so you will hurt no one else.
This puts me in mind of way back in our V for Vendetta episode, right? V, torturing Evie for weeks and weeks and forcing her to evolve essentially.
Very similar, yes.
Yeah, except instead of training Evie to, doing the whole revolutionary murder thing, right? Where he trains Evie to be a force of nature, where V trains Evie to be a force of nature to replace him and to overthrow the existing order of things. Um, Shafa is training Demaya here to, maintain the existing order, right? And I want to talk a little bit about my notes are densest in this chapter because it's so fucking intriguing, right? Um it lays out the whole fucking paradigm here essentially. Old Father Earth is how they talk about the Earth here, right? There's none of this like Mother Earth like shit, right? Old Father Earth is brutal, it is arbitrary, like it can kill you in an instant, and indeed people who have the power to control its kinetic energy can kill you in an instant.
I did
And
think it was weird every time there was an earthquake that kind of heard faintly in the distance, "Who's your daddy?"
well, and indeed, right, it's not
That's
nurture.
canon if you haven't read it. Don't fact check me.
If I could like change one thing about the impending like adaptation, I would no, not even change about the adaptation, like I just want somebody to cut that in, right? Just make an
Yes.
edit of it.
Just the voice
um
of like James Earl Jones or some like really deep, like powerful voice. Just
Rest in
"Who's your
peace.
daddy?" R.I.P. James Earl Jones.
But yeah, I
Shout out
mean,
to that Cuba documentary he did. It was good.
oh yeah, I forgot about that. I need to watch that.
Mhm.
But yeah, no, Old Father Earth, like, none of this nurturing Mother Earth bullshit, right? Our frame of reference for a father figure in this book, you will recall, beat his 3-year-old child to death, right?
Yes.
This is a world where your father can beat you to death, right? And
Can, does, and will.
yeah, yeah, and Demaya's, now Demaya hasn't been exposed to this, right? The person who has the most power to, kill is in her mind her, right? Is the Origines, right? Who are on the
Hmm.
receiving end of this stuff. And that's where she's coming from. She's afraid of this power that she has, and that's where Shafa's it really, when he breaks her hand, right? He says, "I'm going to break her hand." Like, it really is a swing because he starts out nurturing, right? He starts out saying, "Look, when Father Earth stirs, he unleashes so much raw power that taking some of it does no harm to you or anyone else." The air doesn't turn cold. Demaya really tries to restrain her curiosity, but the story is too good. And the idea of using orogeny in a safe way, a way that will cause no harm, is intriguing. No one dies. And that's the thing, right? The idea of using her power, explicitly safely, of resisting safely, comes from a child, right?
Hmm.
She has some, she's gonna learn about the violence undergirding this all very quick. Starting out is like, okay, like I'm being taught to reclaim strength from this paradigm that's lording over me that can destroy me at any moment. Um, but that's when you find out that, oh, nature doesn't just do these, doesn't just have this structure that can destroy you at any moment. People can do that too. People like Shafa.
Exactly right. Exactly right. And it is fucking brutal.
It's the soullessness of the kind oppressor, truly.
And like I read just a little bit of it. Like this goes on for quite a bit, and she has many experiences like this because she gets brought to the fulcrum, which is,
Mm.
the place where all her kind are trained, and then kept, when they're not being used as tools. And she goes and she goes through like her life there. And simultaneously to this, mixed in as a third perspective in this book, we have Cyanide, who is again the same person later in her life in her early 20s. Um, and she is living in the fulcrum as a four ringer. As Lenore said earlier, rings indicate strength. You have 10 rings. That means you're fucking goated at earthbending. I do think
You're
that's really,
basically a physical deity.
yes, I do think it's pretty cool that they have like rings indicating rank and they're different types of stone and like crystal. Like that's sick. I
And on
love
the
the little
subject of stone,
details.
like, cyanite, right? The name that she takes, like everybody who like not graduates, but like moves up within the fulcrum has this name that's stone, right? She has a mentor called Feldspar, right?
Mm.
And you take this name,
Imagine choosing the name Feldspar.
I think Feldspar is a fucking cool name. I don't know what
I'm
you're talking
I'm
about.
I'm I'm this meme has been made by anti-Feldspar gang. We're
Imagine,
fuck
imagine,
Feldspar. All my homies hate Feldspar.
imagine being named Micah because you're just like fucking delicate as shit.
Imagine. No, I don't have anything. Go ahead.
Oh wait, no, people IRL are named Micah. Sorry, y'all.
That's true.
Any any
Imagine being
any
named.
any Micahs listening right now?
Shout out to the Micahs in the chat. You're legally allowed to cyberbully Lenore with no
You're
consequences.
legally allowed to come and break my hand if you find me.
Uh,
But
oh,
yeah,
sorry,
yeah.
what were you saying?
Well,
Yeah.
but yeah, like they take these stone names, because it's to indicate that they've achieved this mastery, yes, but stone is something that's shaped, right? It's something that's moved. And to take this name means you have submitted to being this material in the hands of the fulcrum that's manipulating you.
hmm And in this case, Cyanite is a four ringer, which means she's pretty powerful. She feels like she deserves more, but there's internal politics. Again, it's actually very Jedi Order in this. It feels very like Anakin in Revenge
Instead
of the
of
Sith.
younglings, like you have grits, right?
Yes, exactly. Which I do like that grits as like they're the little bits that are getting worked into diamonds. I like that.
Mm.
Even though it has like horrible implications, especially when you know what happens to the ones who fail out of the program.
Oh
Um,
God.
we'll get there, but Cyanite is being given a mission that is twofold. The sort of face of the mission is she has to go to this harbor and clear it of coral. Pretty easy. It's gonna help out the shipping lanes in the region. Not hard for her to do, but she's being given a mentor, which she initially resents and then resents more when she realizes, oh, this is why I'm getting given a mentor. It is the only living 10 ringer, Alabaster, the most powerful of their order, maybe ever. I mean, just like they're just like, this guy is the fucking guy. He can do anything, and they want them to have a child together. They
Yes.
want because while there are like wild or
Origins.
origins, gracious X-Men origins, um, while there's
X-Men
wide
Origins
while there's wild
Alabaster.
Billie Jeans born out in the countryside, uh, mostly they get born into the fulcrum. They're really trying to breed to control them and for more power, which is of course a double-edged sword, as we'll come to find, because they've created someone like Alabaster who has like
Origin is her lover.
yeah, who has emerged out of the system. And of course, and Alabaster's like mid 40s, much older than her, but not like as old as she fears. And he is just this guy who is best character. Fucking love Alabaster. He rules. Not necessarily the best guy in the world, but I fucking love him.
Mm,
Um, and she has been given this like really shitty task that she realizes that she has to do if she wants to rise in the ranks. And he, though she quickly finds, also has just very little interest in doing this task.
hmm.
He has been clearly made to do it before because of his power. Um, and it just puts them in like an all around like gross situation. And like if you thought it was going to be like cool Jedi Order shit in this fulcrum, they have the powers, they have the rings, that's all cool, but like it's immediately displaced by the like, you got to go have sex with this like older
Yeah,
guy.
his midichlorian count is just like off the chain.
hmm Um,
And that's the thing, right? It's I want to give a sense of his power to the listeners here. When he's stopping this like super volcano, right? And this will actually dovetail into the most horrifying shit here. So, buckle up, y'all. Uh, there's this like super volcano nearby that, as it happens, is some other origin like losing control, having a tantrum, right? Um, an instant later, she feels it, a shockwave of raw orogeny rippling out and down through the pillars of the high road and into the loose schist of the local ground. It's not actual force, just the strength of Alabaster's will and the power it fuels, but she cannot help watching on two levels as his power races, faster than she could ever go, toward that distant radiating churn. And before Cyan even realizes what's happening, Alabaster has grabbed her in some way that she's never experienced before. She feels her own connection to the earth, her own orogenic awareness, suddenly co opted and steered by someone else, and she does not like it one bit. But when she tries to reclaim control of her power, it burns like friction. And in the real world, she yelps and falls to her knees, and she has no idea what's happening. Alabaster has chained them together somehow, using her strength to amplify his own, and there's not a damned thing she can do about it. And then they are together, diving into the earth in tandem, spiraling through the massive boiling well of death that is the hot spot. It's huge, miles wide, and bigger than a mountain. Alabaster does something, and something shoots away, and Cyanite cries out in sudden agony that steals almost at once. I love that line, Alabaster does something, right? I mean,
Hmm.
again, puts me in mind of Tolkien. There is power in the vague, right?
Yes.
There are levels of power that she cannot even comprehend that can shift things around her nevertheless, and you have
I think
to
there's
really
also
wonder at it.
shades. Sorry, I
Mm-hmm.
think there's also shades of like the sort of modern quippiness of like a Gideon the Ninth in that too. Like
You know,
Alabaster does something,
I was I was thinking of
there's some crossover there, I
I
think.
was thinking of Gideon the Ninth as I was reading this book, like because like my main gripe with Gideon the Ninth is that like the main character isn't interested in the lore at fucking all, right?
Hmm.
But like there's so much here that we don't know of how the world works, and it's not because of a fundamental disinterest in it. It's just because of this person can move within it and exert power within it, yes, but in a very limited way. And we're also meant to, I mean, not that Gideon the Ninth doesn't have like aspects of history that have been like blasted from memory, but like because this book has that too. But like there's much more of an immediacy to what has come before, that is exerting its influence now, and
My
we're closer to it.
my main beef with Gideon the Ninth is that they make a nun pizza with left beef joke in that book, and that's fucking unhinged.
I forgot pizza was in that book. Jesus.
Do you seem confused. Do you remember nun pizza with left beef?
None pizza with left beef. I'm totally missing the
It's
reference.
just like a Tumblr thing. Like it's like a 20 early 2010s Tumblr. Uh,
I've not been
cut
on.
this Ryan. This is I
No,
was not on Tumblr either.
don't cut this. Don't cut this. I haven't
This
been
is
on Tumblr since
baffling.
like fucking like 2014. Like, and then only like very, very like, superficially.
I'm sorry. This is bad. I'm not trying to be like confusing or get off path. I figured you would know nun pizza with left beef. Look it up. It is funny, but in the book it is incredibly jarring. It's actually in Gideon. No, it's in Harrow of the Ninth, I think.
There's
But,
so much I've like full disclosure, listeners, I've never fucking read Homestuck. I'm never going to.
mhm.
Like there's just aspects of the internet that I've missed that I had to be there for and was not.
I've
Um
also not. But oh, let me just say though about Alabaster is I think the other side of him
mhm.
that is interesting is despite like this just gargantuan power, and there's so much more under the surface, and it's not just that he's like raw power, he's like figured out the minutia, he's figured out the details, he's thinking beyond what's possible. But he's this pathetic man. I mean,
Mhm.
he's just this like skinny guy who doesn't like to eat, who like just curls up and complains. He's like most of the time he's not wearing his fucking rings. He like throwing them, he's complaining about them. He's like when she first meets him, he's like laying around in a bathrobe. Like obviously he shouldn't have to like when they have their sexual encounter, like she's the one that has to fully take the complete whatever, and like he's lying there, she's not enjoying it. Like
Mhm.
everyone's having, I mean, neither is he, to be clear. They're both victims in that situation. But like
That's the
it's just
thing,
he's
yeah.
just very like the entire time, like at the end of like every like time they stop, he just like flops on the ground. Like even when they're riding on their horses, he's like falling asleep half the time. He's just complaining and like kind of he's a just a very like sad, pathetic. She like wonders if he's like insane. Like she thinks he's insane for part of it. He's not particularly insane. I think she's
He
just
never was.
he never was. He was Jeff the Killer the whole time.
Oh shit.
He was the real Jeff the Killer. This is the real me. Ha ha ha. But no, Alabaster,
I
he's
barely know her.
exactly Blaster. Um, um,
It's
he's a sad
it's
little man.
yeah, and it's interesting like bringing that up, right? Because at the beginning there's bits and pieces of his interaction with Cyanite initially where he's like, "Oh, like you're the first person like who's really been honest with me. Like I'm not training a sycophant here." And like it just genuinely didn't occur to me that like the women they send to me to breed like weren't enjoying it, right?
Yeah,
Like
it's just like Jesus Christ, dude. You just sad little guy. You know what I
yeah,
mean? Like
yeah, like
he's
either he's oblivious or like he's just like consciously like shutting himself off from that possibility, right?
I mean, like he's interacting with minor bureaucrats and like causing a scene just like to reclaim like a shred of dignity. And you understand why, right? Because he's
Oh
been
yeah.
mistreated and because he deserves better. But he's also just like everything he does has this sort of like just underlying kind of like sadness and almost patheticness to it
Mm.
that it just only comes from this guy that has like that analogy doesn't make sense. I'm trying to think of a I don't know a great analogy for it, but he's just got so much power and he's just never once looked internally and like no one and it's not just that he's not looked internally, it's that no one has ever bothered to look internally. No one has ever bothered to take care of his emotional well-being. No one's ever really considered it worthwhile or meaningful to do so. And he just then keeps ascending in power and relevance and strength beyond like the realm of mortals, but he has like the psyche of a child,
Yeah, which for somebody,
practically.
yeah, exactly. For somebody with like the power that he has, right? I mean, the fact that they're sending him on a mission to mentor this, Cyanite in, you know, what is kind of a rinky-dink thing, right? Just clearing a harbor of coral or whatever for this coastal city, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's beneath him, you know.
Yes. It's
But
it's basically beneath cyanite. Like she was like, I could have done this like a
yeah,
bajillion years ago.
but that's the thing, right? It actually puts me in mind of there is a theme in this book that like the worst fate that you can have is decay, right?
Mm-hmm.
Irrelevance, just being like locked in and hidebound and basically just like ossifying, right? And it's born through in this verbal tick that they have, like the word rust is basically their F word, right?
Yes.
It's like rust, like you rusting, asshole, like rust this, and it's like it's a curse that's drawn from a word for decay, right? Stagnation, something allowed to waste away and fall into entropy in a world of constant motion. And that really intrigues me.
See, full disclosure, I completely get that, and it still like makes me laugh every single time. They say rusting, whatever, even a serious
Yeah.
season scene. I'm not saying it's
As
wrong for Jemison to put it in here, but it does take me out of every single time they say it. I won't lie.
it is certainly like, as far as like fantasy curses go, it's, I mean, fucking like, Garth Ennis has the word sex, like replacing the word fuck in, the Crossed series, right?
Yeah.
Like fucking Ed Greenwood has as his like fantasy curse the word Rothgull, which just sounds fucking
Rothgul.
stupid in Dark Lord, right? Which we'll read eventually. Um, it's Rust is certainly there are certainly worse fantasy curses out there.
No, there's certainly like also like good reason for it. Like you described it like beautifully. It's just kind of funny. I especially remember listening to the audiobook and the like woman who voiced it was brilliant, but she would
Mm.
just be giving the most impassioned and she'd be like, Rust, damn it. And I'm just like some Shakespearean stuff, but just whatever. It's
They got an
uh
actual origin to fucking voice it. Yeah.
evil earth. Um but it makes sense given the context. But so these are, we've laid out the three narratives, and I want to kind of so this story is told out of order, and that's what we're doing as well. So hopefully there is some coherence, but hopefully y'all all understand. Three character names, one woman at different points in her life.
Yes.
Um, and I'll ask you this, Lenore. Was there a specific plot line that drew you the most? Because for me, it's like easily the cyanide chapters.
Oh, 100%. Right. They're once like Demaya like was being taken off to the fulcrum, I was like, okay, like she has an expiration date, her story does, right? She's gonna become cyanite, and then like the real fun will start, right? And that's kind of where it was at. Essen, like, not that I
She's living through the apocalypse and is sad about her kid. It's interesting for
yeah,
sure.
not that I expected, not that I expected her to find her kid, because spoiler alert, she doesn't. But like,
What
it
do you mean?
didn't
He's right there on the ground.
fucking Jesus. Uh,
There's another kid that's been taken.
yeah, there's another kid. Like the father, Jija, has disappeared with Nasun, her daughter, her elder daughter, and that's Essen's thing, right? She's traveling to find her. Essen didn't really pick up for me until she ran into Tonki, right? This other person that she meets at a like way station, and then
Mm.
kind of falls in with them. Essen, of course, meets Tonki. She meets a mysterious kid called Hoa, who is more than he seems.
Do you
Speaking of
ever at a way station meet an alt scientist, homeless, transgender baddie like Tonki? Because that is what you can really use to elevate a story. I gotta say.
goals, I tell you what.
It like goes out of its way in this book and the next book to specify that Tonki has a big ass. I love it.
Yeah, well, oh, yeah. Now, do she and Essen get together? Because
I don't think so.
because the line in the book says like the not inconsiderable curve of her ass, right? And the fact that it's like, the fact that it specifically points out not inconsiderable, right? That's an appraisal, right? That's somebody looking at
Sure.
it and like sizing it up. Like
Well,
there's an attraction
or it
there.
could be Hoa doing it. It's unclear given
Oh, that's
who's
true.
narrating. But
Oh, that's true.
but I have not finished. I've certainly not finished the third book. I'm like a quarter or half, almost halfway done with the second one. I will say, if she gets with that soon, she hasn't yet, and she has fucked someone else.
Hmm.
Tonki has. So, make it that what
But
you
yeah,
will.
that's what I was talking about with like fantasy HRT, because there's a little bit where it's like, yeah, like Tonki's run out of the like stuff that she sips that makes it so she doesn't have to shave, so she's irritable about that, which is funny.
But you do have some interesting stuff of like Essun just on the road, traveling to try and find her daughter because her husband obviously killed the son, but just like couldn't bring himself to kill the daughter. Um,
Mm.
and oh yeah, on her way out of town, they like try to kill her, and she, unbeknownst to them, kills her calm she had lived in for years because she destroys the wells. And she's like, they'll find the aquifer that they're doomed and they don't know it, which is real fucked. Um, she says at that point she was like, I deserve to die two comms like two comms over. So another time in her life she also killed a city, which like we'll get to in the cyanide chapters. But
Hmm.
she's like on the road. She runs into this child Hoa, who is just this like sweet feral little child who turns out to be an ancient rock demon. Um,
Oh yeah, there's these guys called Stone Eaters.
and they're ancient rock demons. Don't know what to say about it,
We
except that's what they
literally
are.
like
Like
we
we don't
literally don't
learn
know what the
almost
deal
any.
is.
Yeah, this book just doesn't reveal what the fuck they're up to, except they're like interested in really powerful Billie Jeans. So like this kid is around and her motherly instinct kicks in. But yeah, on the road it's kind of interesting to be like the world's collapsing and everyone's kind of in denial. And they're like, is this a season? Is this gonna be a bad season? And she's just like, oh no, like the fucking world's over. Like it's
Mhm.
done. They don't know it yet because like, okay, you've got 30 years of stores. Cool. No, it doesn't matter. The sun's gonna be gone for centuries, thousands of
Oh
years.
yeah, yeah, and
Like
like
everyone's cooked
and,
collectively.
and most people by this stage are just like reduced to scavengers. Like
The
uh
animals are turning feral. Yeah.
yeah, literally like the oh it's specified in the glossary actually that like the Kirkusa, that's what they have, like giant weasels basically, right? That like they're herbivores in times of plenty and they're carnivores in times that are not, right? And yeah, like that's the environment that Essen's in. The big settlements have kind of fallen, and people are kind of walking to where they imagine like the next safe place would be. Um, the ones who don't want trouble raid fields and silos on the outskirts of calm territories, calm being community, right? The ones who like a fight raid small, poorly defended comms and attack travelers along the lesser Quartent roads. Quartent governors don't mind a little bit of this. Keeps everyone sharp and reminds troublemakers of how they could end up. Too many thefts, though, or too violent an attack, and militias get sent out to hunt the calmless down, right? Kind of like the scavengers in Tender or the Flesh is the Flesh, right? This underclass kept around as a permanent yet ultimately manageable threat to collaborate against. Which especially in a time of apocalypse, like there's a basis for it.
Exactly right. Simultaneously to this, we have her as a child being raised in the fulcrum. This is the part that I probably have like the least to say about. It's just her, being shaped into what she is, really striving to be the best of the Padawans, of the younglings, of the grits, wandering through the halls alone. She has this experience with like really horrible bullying and like it definitely sucks a lot. Um, this like girl named Crack and these other kids who were treating her very poorly. And she actually has a moment where these kids are bullying her, and Crack, who she thought was her friend, turns out to actually have been someone who tried to get her drunk to get her in trouble. And it says, "This is what comes of trusting others. Crack was not her friend, wasn't even someone she liked, but she thought they could at least help each other. Now she'd found the head of the snake that's been trying to eat her, and it's halfway down the gullet of a completely different snake. The result is something too obscene to look at, let alone kill." And I feel like there's like a delivery of that sounds funny. The gullet is down the snake of another, Jerry Seinfeld asked. But like, it's actually like her in this moment being like in these systems where these kids are treated like soldiers slash cattle slash weapons. Um, they turn on each other very easily, and in moments where they are starting to crack, literally in the case of Crack, like they are starting to go, they don't, they know that they're on the outs. They don't know what's going to happen to them if they're quote unquote expelled, but they know it's not good. They turn on each other, and it's like how these systems of oppression are actually making them fight internally. They're making them take out their torment on each other, and this
An
will continue.
unimportant bit of rock ready to be polished into usefulness, or at least to help grind other better rocks, as it
Yeah,
describes her. Yeah. Like,
exactly. It's showing how these systems of oppression of the fulcrum are self-sustaining, even on like the level of children. It's not just being
mm,
enforced on them and they're perceiving it as we are a mass against them, even though, like, from the outside, it's easy to say, well, why don't they all team up? They could win. But on the inside, you can see how this like squabbling politics develops among them. And this doesn't stop when they become ringers, that it gets all the more intense.
yeah, yeah, and if you act out enough, you might just disappear, right? Jasper does not return, one of the kids who bullied her, but Carnelian tells them he's been sent to the satellite fulcrum up in Arctic, since the fulcrum of Eumenes holds too many bad memories for him. This was meant as a kindness, perhaps, but Demaya knows an exile when she sees one. It could be worse, though. No one ever sees or mentions Crack again. And this comes after the horrible shit that I mentioned that I think we might as well get into now,
Yes,
because now
in
you
the
have
in
an
the cool
idea of
parts of the
what's
book.
yeah now you have an idea of what's going on with these kids that you never see again.
And
Because
this is where you find this in the cyanide chapters when she's traveling with Alabaster. You had that really dramatic scene Lenore read, and then Alabaster's like, "Have you seen the nodes that are supposed to stop shakes? It's why we haven't had a season in so long. Why
yes,
don't you come
yes,
see this shit?"
yeah, the reason that there is a state like the Sanzed equatorial affiliation, the reason that there can be a state at all holding on to a expansive territory of any size, is there are nodes, um within which there are nodes which control a certain amount of territory and a radius around them, within which the earth is kept stable, right? Tectonic activity doesn't cause earthquakes or like knock over buildings. It doesn't disrupt civilization within these areas of control. And how are these areas of control established, Jacob?
Well, let's just say she goes to the node maintainer who has died in this tragic accident and says she sees the bigger picture in spite of the effort to concentrate on the minutia. The node maintainer, a child, kept like this for what have been months or years. A child whose skin is almost as dark as Alabaster's and whose features might be a perfect match for his if they weren't so skeletal. And what had happened was this child had been put in a fucking machine, like a chair, where they hook shit up to the back of the kid's head and to keep the kid alive and sedated, and the just use the instincts of their orogeny to stop quakes, and the kid is helped in this like sort of permanent suspended state of just nothingness, basically, like just like hung there with like cords and shit. And like they've like got a doctor to administer like penicillin and to like wipe up drool and like piss and shit, because like the body is like barely alive. And they find out also that like sometimes they bring in like local perverts who are willing to pay to like molest the children potentially, because there's something happened to wake this kid up fully, and the kid has like a handprint on its leg, and that is what caused this like super volcano that Alabaster only briefly or was only barely able to keep from like maybe ushering in a season right then and there, which is a fascinating example of like the way this society, despite like trying to make them safer, has in this situation only barely narrowly avoided its own destruction on completely like its own terms, using the mechanisms that are supposed to keep it safe, this greater good evil that they've like wrought. And they do this on a mass scale to basically all the children who cannot learn control in their opinions.
Yes, if you've ever wondered about the mechanics of an Omelis, right here is a stab thereat, right?
Right.
You know, the
I
whole
feel like it
civil.
almost is self-consciously. Like I feel like this is almost on purpose. Like there's no way she's not thinking of Amelis when she wrote
Oh,
this.
I mean, she wrote the ones who stay and fight as like a
Yeah,
direct response to that story. Like it's
sure.
definitely on her mind. But yeah, yeah. Let me see.
And also, it's definitely implied this is one of Alabaster's, as you can see, one of Alabaster's children
Oh yeah, and he has
from one of
several
his
several
many.
just like this kid. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, but standing here with the ultimate proof of the world's hatred, dead and cold and stinking between them, she can't even flinch this time. Because if the Fulcrum can do this, or the Guardians, or the Jemisin leadership, or the Geomests, or whoever came up with this nightmare, then there's no point in dressing up what people like Cyanite and Alabaster really are. Not people at all, not origins. Politeness is an insult in the face of what she's seen. Raga. This is all they are. It's worth noting here, like I like the sort of there's a little bit of, I don't want to say that the prose is choppy, but it does allow some choppiness in because the word because, right, is its own sentence, right? Especially in the Essen chapters, right? You'll see a lot of parentheticals like, oh, it's you look at this and it's this way. And in parentheses, it'll be like, it isn't, right? There is a certain immediacy about the prose that way, right? It's rendered as something that's not being related to you, but as something that's being processed in the moment by the person who's telling the story, right? Because of the enormity of what's being experienced right now.
And
Yeah.
so things move on, and like, you understand why Alabaster is as sort of cynical and fucked up as he is, and you see Cyanite becoming more and more that way. But they have to continue on their little quest, and they have a moment. Um, they come to this town, and we don't have to get into all the little details, but they go to when she goes to clear the coral off, Cyan does. She finds this giant fucking obelisk underneath, and there are these little obelisks that float through the sky. These like little like things from these dead civs, like some ancient civilization. They kind of float around, flickering the sky, but like they don't really mean anything to anyone. But this one is like been under there, and it rises out of the harbor, causing quite the kerfuffle, we'll say. And there's a dead stone eater inside. Once again, that's the race of non-human stone shapeshifters that we know nothing about. And by we, I mean like also us, your hosts, because we have not read the full trilogy. Um, and like, yeah, it's definitely some source of orogenic power, though, some source of like orogenic magic that once again, this dead Civ must have harnessed somehow. There must have been another way of being at some point because there's
Mm-hmm.
these structures that are floating that are made for them, but they have no idea what, why, how. Though Alabaster can clearly influence them somehow and draw power from them. And there comes a moment and they don't quite understand why, a guardian shows up for them, um after summoning this thing that they maybe shouldn't have seen or shouldn't have summoned or something. And in a just fit of fear, Cyanite draws from this power source that is forbidden. She's only supposed to draw from the earth and has her ways. And it fucking explodes and creates a volcano and destroys the entire town. And they're only able to escape because like this guardian angel stone eater of Alabasters brings them to an island off the coast. And she's just like, yo, I actually just like nuked a small city. Shit. But they are briefly free on this little island that turns out to be like a sex pirate commune.
It's so fucking chill. I love it.
um and I find it interesting. So like, and I know that feels like really jarring, but like that's basically, we could go through all the details, little conversations, but read the book. But
Mm.
like, yeah, no, like they managed to escape in this like really shocking moment. And it's almost like anticlimactic. It's like, what? Well, it's over. Like we're gone. We're whatever. We didn't even try to escape, and now we're, huh? And it's like neither of them can feel really like relieved. They're just on this island. And for Cyanide, the idea of an island like in a world this like tectonically unstable seems terrifying. And they've been told there's no society on these islands. Turns out there's basically these like raider bands that live here, and their origins can kind of uh quell the waters, even though they're not like properly trained. And they get to live here for a little while. And it's not like they have another choice. Like if they went somewhere else, they'd be safe.
Hmm.
But yeah, it's like a fascinating break in the action that is like thrust upon them in a way that makes it almost uncomfortable to everyone involved. And like Cyanide alongside the reader can't like fully and properly enjoy it because like this is actually not what her life is supposed to be, even though it's like pretty cool and chill. But do you
Yeah,
want to
and
tell
our
them about the island?
yeah, well, because it's our first impression of the island of Moab, right? Is the first thing that we hear about it is, yeah, this is a place where origins are in control, right? And okay, so it's set apart from this land of, horrific constant like brutality and just stripping you of your humanity. That's the constant paradigm if you're an origin, right? It's literally a paradise. It strikes at what we think that Shafa was introducing Demaya to all that time ago, right? It's this thing of, okay, like old Father Earth can destroy you at any moment, but if you take a little bit of power from it, it's not so bad, right? If you do a little bit of piracy against the civilization of Sanzed, right, to survive, it's not so bad, right? Because you're carving out your own niche in this world. But as it happens, even that's not enough, because that contradiction cannot long endure.
But there is a hot guy there.
A hot guy named Inon, who's just the fucking coolest.
It's just this like tall, like 6'7", like ripped dude with like braids, and he's got like orogenic powers, but he hasn't really trained it. He just knows how to quell shakes.
Mm-hmm.
And he's a fucking pirate leader, and the only reason they don't choose him as the leader of the whole thing is he's too good at being a pirate, and he's just like this, just like bisexual baddie who's like, it's like the thing is she was like, he wanted me, but he also wanted Alabaster. He wanted
Mm-hmm.
both of us. And then her and Alabaster have this like, well, which one is he going to take? And she's like, I guess you can have him. And she doesn't really mean it. And he's like, okay. and and it like, on cue, being Alabaster, she like comes up to the house after they have sex, and she just hears like Alabaster like crying inside because it's classic
Mm-hmm.
Alabaster. Um, and yeah, they end up like having this like sort of thruple relationship where like, okay, so worth noting that the all the forced copulation between Alabaster and Cyanide has conceived a child.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but they don't have sex anymore. But they do have sex with Inan, both of them, and they like to watch each other have sex. And they still feud with each other the way they have before, this like sort of bickering, mutual respect thing. And like it's just like a vibe that kind of works for them as they live on this island that's, the precarity of it is obviously like immense on so many levels. Like I said,
Yeah.
like the characters know it's not permanent. And they're literally on an island in a world with so many tectonic shifts that like
Mm-hmm.
people have not even tried to sail beyond sight of the coast before. And they're being hunted. And at this point, you're pretty sure that, as soon later on is this woman. Like, if you haven't picked it up at this point, you're a little late. Um, I guess it's possible. I guess they haven't technically said it, but like, come on. Um,
There's a bit right before the everything on the island goes to shit where Essen's told like, oh, Fulcrum trained, the ones who survive it always seem to sound like you, and it's like, okay, yeah, yeah, that's
yeah, exactly. Um, but it is like this really beautiful moment. There's even this interlude that's like, even there's always chaos, there can be these little beautiful moments. And like, yeah, for very briefly, they have this child and they like co-parent in this like
mm-hmm.
thruple relationship.
Yeah,
Um,
it's
yeah.
it's messy, like Alabaster, like, even through their whole, thruple, like island adventure that they're on. He's like, look, you don't really like me. I know this, right? It's like it's not perfect, but it's another arena which, they can attempt to relate each other within. And meanwhile, they can get out their pent up stress, with the hot fucking pirate guy.
I do like this. It's amazing. What do they even call this? It's not a threesome or a love triangle. It's a two and a half sum, an affection dihedron. And, well, maybe it's love. That's a quote. I like that.
Yeah,
An
yeah.
affection dihedron.
And they have, they have the luxury of, uncertainty, right? They don't know quite what it is, but they can, relax in it. It's not the sort of, uncertainty that, in whose shadow lurks death, right? I mean, worth noting, the end of every chapter has an excerpt from like stone lore, right? The histories of this world. And there's a bit here at the end of chapter 18 that's like talking about the special organs that you have if you're an origin, right, that you help you control like your shit. And the caption here, or whatever you call it, is from observations of sessional variation in overdeveloped individuals, 7th University Biochemistry Learning Com, with appreciation to the fulcrum for cadaver donation. Right? Because that's literally what you are at the end of the day, is a cadaver to be studied and to be mastered. Right? And that, the fact of that, right? The fact that there are aspects of history that are just lost, that can only be related to you in bits and pieces, and that it falls to whatever brutal authority is above you to synthesize, is shot throughout this entire book.
I like that phrenology is real in this. What if phrenology was real and it made you cooler, and more powerful? But yeah, and I will note that it's like it's not even like this island is some kind of like perfect. Well, like they are pirates. Like, yeah, it's yo ho, but then they go out on the sea. She goes with them, and they straight up like kill two boats full of people, and leave no survivors. Like
Oh yeah.
they don't. They're not playing around. They're not like this isn't just like Jack Sparrow, like haha, like they're not actually stealing. They're stealing and like letting no, like they fucking ice everyone they come across.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and they have to. They're this is the situation they've been put in.
Yeah,
And
I mean,
when you try to
elsewhere in the book it says, necessity is the only law, says stone
yes.
lore, right? And so these sorry to cut you off, but like
No, you're fine.
you know what that means to different communities, whether they're small comms, whether they're like island paradises, or big states like Sanzed, right? How people interpret that, what people deem necessary, says a lot about society. It says a lot about society.
It says a lot about our society. And you know what else says a lot about our society? When somebody like Cyanide tries to fix a volcano, she tries to fix a volcano with the city she blew up so it doesn't kill more people. It's been a trap the whole time because the Guardians have been posted up just waiting for her to come along because they're like, I bet that bitch isn't dead. Turns out she's not dead. And turns out, guess who rolls up? It's Shafa, and he's got a bunch of other Guardians with him, and it's four boats. And you're like, oh, Alabaster can protect you. It's okay. Yeah, turns out the Stone Eater comes out, grabs Alabaster, drags him into Earth, and they got to do like this dramatic ass battle that just like leads to the island just getting washed.
it's
It's
it's it's it's
brutal.
fucking cool, and it's if the movie doesn't get made and we don't see this, it'll be a fucking goddamn tragedy. And again, it's the culmination of, I mean, this is a society, SANZ, the equatorial affiliation is, this is a society that, uses contradictions to its own advantage, right? That maintains, small bands of highwaymen, I guess,
Mm.
ruffians, like, bandits, yeah, that maintains small bands of bandits to unite people against, right? That leaves a volcano chilling on a former population center when they have people who could fix it, specifically to bait people, right?
Mhm.
Like that leaves these things in place unpatched so that they can swoop in and do not disaster capitalism, but disaster, like statecraft.
And the Guardians when they roll up, I mean, it's so brutal because you're like, okay, Enon to the rescue. And we know Enon's a badass,
Mm-hmm.
whatever, but he is still, he is still a user of orogeny, right? And you have a Guardian roll up, a man naked to the waist. He claps hands onto either side of Enon's head, fingers splayed across his cheeks like spiders, and grins at Cyanide as Enon's eyes widen. And then it is, oh, Earth, it is. She feels it when it happens, not just in her cessipine. It is a grind like stone abrading her skin. It is a crush along her bones. It is everything that is in Inon. All the power and vibrancy and beauty and fierceness of him made evil, amplified and concentrated and turned back on him in the most vicious way. Enin does not have time to feel fear. Cyanide does not have time to scream as Enin comes apart. It's like watching a shake-up close, seeing the ground split, watching the fragments grind and splinter together, then separate, except in flesh. Now Enon is on the floor, in a pile. The guardian who has killed him stands there, splattered in blood and grinning through it. Ah, little one, says a voice, and her blood turns to stone. Here you are. It's so fucking scary. Because Shafa has just rolled up on Shafa, her old guardian has just rolled up, and that shit is terrifying.
Yeah, still with all the fucking, with all the affection, with all the, as you said earlier, this is what love is to him, right? This is the paradigm in which he exists. The greatest act of love is rendering somebody a tool, right? Rendering somebody who might otherwise, go off and make a super volcano or whatever. The greatest act of love you can do for such a person, if you were a guardian, is to have that threat constantly over their head of, without iron discipline, you could be just like scrambled, like Inan is. And
And she's holding her child too, like holding Koru,
yeah,
and
speaking of acts of love, yeah.
yeah, and Alabaster's like, please don't let him take the kid because he knows what's gonna
Mm-hmm.
happen to this fucking kid. Um,
Yeah, it's gonna be
and
turned into an Omelis kid somewhere. Like,
exactly, and she's facing off and she's saying no, no, and Shafa has his "I told you never to say no to me," literally referencing when she was 8 years old and he broke her hand, and
mm-hmm.
it says, "Everyone she loves is dead, everyone except Koru, and if they take him, sometimes even we crack." Better that a child never have lived at all than live as a slave. Better that he die. Better that she die. Alabaster will hate her for this, for leaving him alone, but Alabaster is not here, and survival is not the same as living. So she reaches up, out. The amethyst is there above, waiting with the patience of the dead, as if somehow knew this moment would come. She reaches for it now and prays that Alabaster was right about the thing being too much for her to handle. And as her awareness dissolves amid jewel toned light and faceted ripples, as Shafa gasps in realization and lunges for her, as Koru's eyes flutter shut over her pressing, smothering hand, she opens herself to all the power of the ancient unknown and tears the world apart. Um, and it doesn't get too exceedingly specific, but yeah, like she blows the shit to pieces.
She does,
And
yes,
barely
and
survives.
and as well, this is the mastery of Jemisin, right? Because she has created a scenario where you were cornered by such brutality, where the alternative is death, is a fate worse than death, and she has crafted this scenario where it can be an act of love in a certain context to kill your child, because
Mm.
that is what cyanide does. She kills Corundum rather than subject him to whatever fate Eumenis, the Fulcrum Sanzed, has in store for him.
And there literally is this like sometimes we crack, right? Like it
Mm-hmm.
is on a global scale, on an earth scale, like an earthquake, like these fault lines slamming into each other. And you see, but that intersects with the personal in the form of her because of her power. And it's so interesting because how the book opens, it talks about this is how the world ends, and it's her mourning the death of another child one day. And then it goes into the literal earth destroying calamity, but it's all part
Mm-hmm.
of the same shit because Alabaster turns out to be the guy who killed the world
Mm-hmm.
because of all of this. He is the guy who summons this. So this is a moment where it all cracks and it's connected to these gems in the sky that they were forbidden to think about. And it's connected to this child that they were forbidden to have. And there's this system that's exceedingly violent, all for the greater good. And it's all self-perpetuating. So no one person has to feel like it's their fault. And the
Mm-hmm.
system that is supposed to keep them all alive is what here in this moment and in this future moment, a few years to come, once Alabaster is able, kills everyone. For all, I mean, maybe the series, I don't know how the series ends. Maybe they save the world. I don't know. But for all intents and purposes, kills everyone. And it's so fucking cool how it all intersects.
There is a direct historical parallel that N.K. Jemisin draws to the situation of cyanide killing her child. And it's to the story of Margaret Garner,
Hmm.
who was an enslaved woman who escaped slavery with her family and killed her 2 year old daughter rather than let her be recaptured. And she
Yeah.
would have killed her other 3 kids if the authorities hadn't caught her and stopped her, right? And this was in Ohio,
Mm.
an ostensibly free state, But what was in effect at this time? The Fugitive Slave Act, right?
Yeah.
Which mandated that free states assist in returning escaped slaves to their enslavers, Like this is the stuff that contradiction is made of. It's the ripples that the refusal to resolve that contradiction of half slave and half free. It's the ripples that that situation has, and until such contradictions are resolved, you're going to have these horrific decisions, these horrific situations for which it is pointless to criticize a Margaret Garner, right? The proximate
Uh-huh.
cause is the presence of brutality and its creeping domination.
And it doesn't just stay interpersonal, right? These individual rocks that are cracking, these individual lives. There is a fucking cataclysm that comes. There is a
Yes.
apocalypse in the form, in the story of Margaret Garner, in the story of slavery, in the form of the Civil War, which kills more people than any United States war ever has, despite how few people there were relative to the population. There is apocalyptic violence. But it is not that apocalyptic violence is not more or less important than these individual stories. It is the cavalcade of all of these individual stories put together. It is all these individual stories collectively, and it is made of and by these stories, and it is important because of these stories. Um, and I guess that's like, first of all, really important for us to think when we think about big things, right? When we think about politics, when we think about contradiction, right? And that's what like she's making us see here. There's actually,
Mm-hmm.
it's not like, because oh my God. So like when she first started writing her fantasy, right? She was like, I got to tell this big story about the artifact and the power and the quest and the saving the world. But then she wanted to tell a smaller story about people. But it's actually, it's both, right? You can tell the big story and the small story. And the big story is because of the small stories. And it is best told and understood through the small stories because that is how we all understand it. None of us actually have the perspective of a stone eater because we can't even figure out what the fuck that is. None of us are God. None of us are Father Earth and think in aeons. You can say the clouds will cover the earth for thousands of years, and we think, well, where will Essun get her meal tomorrow? And so will she, and so would we in her scenario. And it's like that. And and I think it's fascinating. I really do. I love it.
Yeah, yeah, it's fantastic, and perhaps there is a way out of what Eumenes has. I mean, of course, there's a way out of it. Eumenes has been destroyed when the fucking like continent was cracked in half. But where we end up is back with Essen, right? Who at this point
She has to start over.
she and Tonki and Hoa, the kid who himself is a stone eater, as it happens,
Mm-hmm.
have come to this community of origins that's in a geode below the earth, right? It's if you've played Dark Souls, right? Think of the Crystal Caves. It's kind of like that.
Mm,
And
exactly.
and yeah, it's a new kind of community entirely.
Yes. And we don't spend a lot of time here. I know that the sequel, a lot of that is focused on this place, but and this is really where it's kind of wrapping up. It's leading to the questions that will end it. But we're finding out towards the end here, if we haven't figured out already, okay, Essun was Cyanite. She had settled down. She found a new life for herself. She had a couple kids despite herself. And once again, this thing has perpetuated. And yeah, now she's in this place. She has no idea where her daughter is. But who does she come across in this fucking pit in the middle of nowhere where suddenly, origins are starting to gather and I won't get in. There's a woman that can summon them. It's really not that important to the plot of this book. I'm sure it's deathly important to the future too. But for some reason, origins are gathering. They're talking about, well, how do we create a better world? How do we create a better society? But she doesn't care about that, right? That's not what she's focused on. What she's focused on here is she comes across fucking alabaster, and he's burned, and parts of his body have turned to stone from the effort of this thing that has literally killed the world, done what Father Earth has repeatedly tried to do and failed. This one man has just has become a living nuke and lived to tell the tale barely. And he's just like, Cyanite, what's up? And she's like, oh my God. And then he's like, ever heard of a moon? That's how the book ends. It's a little more dark.
There's a meme that somebody posted a while back on I don't remember where, but like it's like, okay, the first rule of writing fantasy is fuck up the moon, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like if the moon is like shattered or like, broken in half or like, whatever, right? Um, we haven't gotten a description of the moon so far, and this is fucking why.
And in fact, earlier in the book, it has like a brief moment where it's like the sky has stars and it's beautiful and whatever, and there's something missing, but you wouldn't know it's missing. How could you?
And
You know, and at that point, you're like, oh, well, odd.
I
And
love
that's where it
this.
ends. It literally says, it says, he's lying there, right? And he's wheezing, and he says, I need your help to fix it. Oh no, Cyan. You don't even bother to correct him this time. You can't take your eyes from his amused, nearly skeletal face. When he speaks, you notice that some of his teeth have turned to stone too. How many of his organs have done the same? How much longer can he, should he, live like this? I don't want you to fix it, Alabaster says. It was collateral damage, but Eumene's got what it deserves. No, what I want you to do, my Demaya, my Cyanite, my Essun, is make it worse. You stare at him speechless. Then he leans forward. That this is painful for him is obvious. You hear the creak and stretch of his flesh and a faint crack as some piece of stone somewhere on him fissures. But when he's close enough, he grins again, and suddenly it hits you. Evil, eating earth. He's not crazy at all, and he never has been. Tell me, he says, have you ever heard of something called a moon? And that, we already said that, but that's the end of the book. And it's a real like, what the fuck?
What a goddamn banger of the
And
last several paragraphs.
I'm like almost halfway through the second book, and I still don't know why that matters. But
Well, because I imagine like what does our moon do, right? It regulates tides.
yeah, yeah.
So I imagine okay, like we're gonna create some not a body that requires people to to maintain and gatekeep and gaslight and girl boss, right? Just another
Mhm.
force of nature that is impartial, that is supposed to regulate the activity of old Father Earth.
Yeah. But yeah, no, and that's how it kind of concludes, and it rules and it ties it together. He says all the names, and it's her and Alabaster at the end of the world, and she's failed for like the umpteenth time, and here's here is this destroyed guy, and everything is destroyed as the consequence of their oppression, and he's here with just some new crazy plan.
Mm-hmm.
10 years later. Um, and
And
yeah, it hits.
that's what separates him from. I mean, there's a story that Shafa tells a young Demaya, young Cyanite, young Essun very early on, right? About like this there was this crazy origin who destroyed a city for no reason, and like this right hand woman of the emperor put him down. It's your classic like Marvel story, right? Of oh
Mhm.
this person was a revolutionary and like he tried to change the world too fast, right? That's what separates an alabaster from that is what he's doing is born from profound resentment, yes, but also profound love, profound compassion for the children that he's born that are subject to torture eternally for the continued stability of the world, right? Or this part of it, right? It's from compassion for the people who are born and bred and, killed by this paradigm because of how the world works, who in microcosm are individuals that embody the brutality of Earth. And he's like, what if the Earth were a little less brutal? And that's where he's starting from. And I mean, draw whatever conclusion, whatever parallel to the real world you will, whatever state, whatever system that's in the world right now, killing people and going on maintaining itself so it can continue to kill people, watering itself with blood, right? Eventually somebody from one of those paradigms who's been whipped on their entire life is going to whip back.
Mhm.
And you better be ready for them when they do.
Yeah.
Not to put them down, but to go along but to go along with the paradigm shift that represents.
Though hopefully won't require destroying every living thing on the equator. We can hope we can avoid that. But in a world with nukes, who can say?
I mean, that's the
But
tragedy of it, right? Is we don't have the luxury of choosing how the contradiction is to be resolved.
right.
We don't have the luxury of choosing, whether or not we have a civil war over the end of chattel slavery. That's just
Yeah.
that is the point that history has been pushed to.
Right. Yeah. The question, like, imagine
Mm-hmm.
you're in the Civil War and it's like, well, wouldn't this be better if we could just vote it out? And it was like, yeah, it would be, but you didn't do that. Right. And
Mm-hmm.
now here's where we're at.
the
You know,
one the one thing I like from Hamilton, right, is that third cabinet battle that was cut from the musical, right, about the debate over ending slavery, right? That last line that George Watt that bit that Hamilton has, like, do you realize the precious time these legislators wasted? Institutionalizing slavery only multiplies our troubles. Wait till the 1800s and the population doubles. Skip a bit, right? The last fucking line that George Washington has is, let's hope the next generation thinks of something better. And it ends with a tick, 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 boom, right?
hmm
There's something there.
I like the part in Hamilton when the funny guy comes out in the coat and he sings about killing people. I like that guy. I like the funny British guy. He's cool.
Ah,
Hamilton episode confirmed? No.
God,
That would be outside our purview. Um, I haven't found a way to work this in because every scene with the Guardians is like so bleak. So I'm just gonna like say it out of context. Imagine the way the Guardian I'm laughing at my own joke. It sucks. Uh Imagine that actually the way the Guardians first defeated their orogeny was said Cessapine, more like Sussy Pine. More like sussy penis, and then they tapped them on the back, and they immediately dunked on them. And I'm pretty sure that's what happened.
person was sent off to a fucking like satellite fulcrum to be just like molested forever for that joke.
Yeah, no, yeah, that's the last thing you hear where they put you in the contraption. It's like what? Yeah,
Fucking
fucking,
Jesus.
fucking, yeah. Shafa Fortnite dances on you. Yeah.
Well,
Um,
and again, fundamentally, what Shafa says is, sometimes, like, we're gonna hurt you, and you don't know why that will hurt you, but we do this because to prevent people from hurting others.
mhm. And it is interesting. It's like in this book, you don't know, is Shafa a victim? Maybe. I don't know. He was definitely born into this. He was definitely raised. But like, does that excuse anything? No, it's like a fucking cycle, right? And not some like liberal understanding of a cycle of violence of like, oh, it's all bad because it's self-perpetuating. No, actually, like, fighting back is the only thing that can stop it. But these systems are perpetuating where the victimized continue to victimize other people inside the system rather than push upward, which is, of course, what happens. But we could go on and on. This is a really fun book that I really recommend people read. Like, we can give you the plot summary, but there's really just like something about reading it. Jemison's a very strong writer. I'm like definitely going to tear through the other two books in this series. And I could definitely see us returning to it at some point, though. I'm not sure how many of the major themes are the same or not, but it's so much fun. Yeah, but I've had a blast with this episode, and I think it's also great to, like, coming off of Tolkien, to talk about other fantasy novels, much more modern fantasy, and
Mm-hmm.
how the genre is like still very fun, and we'll have examples of it being very vibrant and cool, and not also not from writers who are just like Tolkien and have the same
Mm-hmm.
assumptions as Tolkien as well. Not that we have to go back into those, but
She mentions at one point that, look, it's not the medieval Western Europe like fantasy settings that I have a problem with. It's just that there's a proliferation of bad ones, right?
yes,
Because that's what people know and are riffing on. And she's like, I literally just want to do something different.
yeah, do something good, and
And
she has.
yeah, mad fucking respect for that.
Well, that's our time for the day. I don't know. I'm trying to think. What do I have?
Honestly, I almost think, no, let me have the confidence of my convictions. I do think that this book would be just as strong, if not stronger, without the appendix, like laying out the terms in a glossary, right?
Hmm.
Because you can figure out what
I didn't really refer to it at
yeah,
all.
exactly. You
So,
can you can figure out what geomests are. You can figure out what comms are. You can figure out what quartents and orogeny and everything is, because Jemison immerses you in this setting to where, I mean, it's the fucking, like, even if you don't know, even if you can't exactly define it, you can get the gist of it. Which is the hallmark of a really good Shakespeare play. Like, even if you don't understand all the language, the context will fill it in for you. Like, this does that.
well, much like an appendix in this book that's maybe is unnecessary, we're going to add an additional appendix to this episode, and you can find it right after this. There's just not going to be an appendix, I guess. I don't know. I don't know. That's a dumb bit, but I think it's funny.
They removed my appendix 24 years ago.
All right, Ryan will figure out some way to make this make sense. See y'all. Peace.
Thank you for listening to Socialist Shelf Radio.